I'm the IT project manager at Ride Connection, and we're a Portland area nonprofit. We are actually created by TriMet, the local fixed area transit system, to basically find ways to meet the needs of older adults and people with disabilities, and kind of fill in the uneven areas of the Portland area transit system. So we're a nonprofit and largely state and federal money funded. They hired me about 3 years ago, and one of the first things I did when I got there is I went to a ITS training, and I was like, okay, this will be great because there's a lot of people. We ourselves actually work with some 30 or more nonprofits and local government entities, and we coordinate around transportation, and you know, everybody's got their specialty, and we figure out what is the best way to meet the needs of the various demographics and geographic areas of the metro area. So I wanted to coordinate with a lot of people. There's some larger partners that had their own scheduling and dispatch systems, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll go to this training and I'll find out a little bit about the standards out there so that I can learn how to interoperate with these systems. And I go to that training and I find that there actually are no such standards. That they simply do not exist, and they have not existed, and there's a lot of standards for fixed route, there's standards around billing, but if you want to take a trip, take a trip request that somebody has placed, and just a high-level talk, say you want to click on that trip and you want to drag it over to this other provider, you can't get there from here. That's just not possible. So I come from 10 years of working with nonprofits, and I'm used to a kind of a low level of technology skill within organizations. But this was kind of stunning to me. I thought there would be more. So that discovery and our own need was the genesis of our project, which we call the Demand Responsive Transportation Clearinghouse. Basically, creating a hub where different providers can post their trips, and other agencies can grab them and say, yeah, I can do that, I'll take it. And make it quick, make it easy, make it transparent for everybody involved. It involves some elements of what we just traditionally call brokerage, but it's more than that because it's bi-directional. It's just not top-down, right? It's a collection of peers that can send trips to one another. So that's basically what we've been writing. One key piece of that is, okay, how do you actually get different systems? How do you get vendor A's system to talk to the clearinghouse and have vendor B's system talk to the clearinghouse? And so that is probably the stickiest wicket, in the sense that nobody agrees on any formats. So we've just gone ahead and we're just creating an initial format with the idea that it doesn't have to be the end-all or the be-all, but for a lot of different reasons, nobody has been able to step forward and create any kind of definitive standard for the industry. So we're not aspiring to create a standard, but we are aspiring to create a proof of concept. So that's what we're doing. And we're also, in addition to the clearinghouse, which is web-based, we're also building an adapter that can sit right next to somebody's vendor software and basically perform the translation services between the vendor software and the clearinghouse, so that what gets into the clearinghouse is always in one format. That's our first kind of stab at it, and the basic idea here is systems should be able to talk to each other. This is a fundamental expectation that we should be having for our systems now.
Already you can see how complexities layer on complexities, because what I'm trying to do in Omaha fits our geography and our problems, and I can hear Kevin in Portland and understand how that translates. But the first thing to emphasize is that this program will not be a silver bullet top down. It's got to grow bottom up, because each of our geographies and agencies are different. And I wished I had a transit agency that was nice enough to create some sort of entity like Ride Connection, because in Omaha, western Iowa, and eastern Nebraska, there's no big daddy that can come in and say, we need to do this. And so I'm trying to have to get the smaller agencies that do things to try to come together. My big problem is I'm trying to put all of the trips into a pool to make each route as efficient as possible. And so that's another complexity on top of the data interoperability that Kevin talked about. And I don't know that it's possible. I've run at it several years and it may not be possible. But there's tremendous efficiencies that can be gained if you can put your pool of rides tomorrow in a pool and look at routing them on the most efficient way possible. But that may be stupidly wild, and so I don't know. But it's got to be bottom up, and it's got to fit each geography and each agency profiles that you have to work together. So that's kind of a capsule from the Midwest.
Bruno Fisher, I'm the Deputy Administrator of the Montezuma Regional Transit Authority in Fitchburg, Mass. We're centrally located. And as Larry said, we run a very large brokerage operation, which we benefited by the fact that the state actually, back in like 2000 or so, coordinated all the health and human services agencies, at least 3 of them that were willing to participate in one office. So we deal with just one office, and they've since joined other agencies in that same office. And they had just put out an RFR for a statewide brokerage that actually has been withdrawn as of last Friday. They ran into some legal issues, but unrelated to the brokers. But so as Larry said, we're a very large broker for Massachusetts. We're doing about 70% of the state as far as trips and expenditures, or as far as trips for about 62% of the expenditures. So I guess that's cost efficiency there. We broker about 4.1 million trips a year for the brokerage. Do probably about 98% of that, 99% of that, all private vendors. We have a very robust technology. We have a vendor portal. All of the information goes to the vendors. We prepare all their bills, post all the bills for them. They go through the bills all online, submit them. We then turn around and submit to the state. All the complaints are handled online. Again, there is some obviously phone interaction with people and whatnot, but again, there's a lot of technology brought to bear on that. We do quite a bit of, with the transit, we do quite a bit of, we do subscription service locally in their fixed group communities. A lot of ADA, a lot of veteran shuttles that we run to the Boston area and the Worcester area, which are the 2 largest cities in Massachusetts. So what we try to do with this veterans grant that we receive is, the idea is to really target it towards veterans, but what it really is we've also been working with the MSAA United We Ride group, Yehuda and Goeway, for probably since about 2006. And so the model we had actually developed, which was not funded in their second round, we received about a $400,000 first round research grant, and then we were funded about $100,000 in the second round of that. Several other agencies down south got larger grants because they were really quite a ways behind in the coordination piece. So what we did was basically took our model from the second round of the United We Ride, and that's kind of tweaked it a little bit for the veterans. What we're trying to do with the veterans is to try to coordinate it with all the other human service activities that we do. We also deal with probably 6 or 7 of the 15 transit authorities in Mass. And the idea is, not only to use our rather robust technology that we've already got in place, but then really to boil it down to this individual trip coordination. And we've been talking with Larry, and we've actually developed a very good relationship with several other New England groups, Coast up in New Hampshire, as well as a woman, Barbara Donovan, from the Vermont Transit Department of Transportation. And so we actually been meeting with Larry once a month, and I guess the idea we're trying to really boil it down to is we want to develop a protocol, a very standard protocol that basically anybody who joins us will use the same exact protocol. It's and I think we've looked somewhat to try to minimize the data pieces that are in there, because the more data you put in, or the more fields you have, or the more requirements you put in there, obviously some of the agents or the vendors start to balk at getting too much look into the database. So what we really are trying to, and we certainly have quite a ways to go still, but the idea is to take some type of protocol that people can easily agree to, make some minimalist set of data requirements, address, destination, origin, all that, and really boil that down to people signing on to this protocol, and then being able to go back and forth with being able to coordinate trips. I think one of our first initially doing is we're rolling it out between 3 sites. And again, we're still developing the protocol, so it's not done yet. But we use a software from HP Software Solutions, which used to be in Andover, Mass. Now it's up in Lowell. And so what we're going to do with them is we're going to work between our own site, which is this ITMS software from HPSS, Lowell Regional Transit, which uses the same software, and a community, actually, the town of Acton, but which is actually just started this TMA, Transportation Management Association, which they've got about 7 or 8 communities. And so we're all using the same software. What we want to do is prove the concept that you can transfer the data pieces we're talking about at least within our own system first. And then if we're able to prove that concept, then what we want to do is then work with Dan Fitch, who will be later on in this discussion, down at Metro West, which is a couple RTs over from us down in the suburbs of Metro Boston, to try to integrate with Strategen software, the adept software they have.
Yes, my name is Daniel Fitch. I'm with Metro West Regional Transit Authority in Framingham. We're another one of the 15 regional transit authorities in Massachusetts outside of Boston. And as Larry had mentioned, we are a round 2 recipient of the TLCI grant. In such, we're developing and expanding our mobility management center for both veterans and other members of our community. Prior to this grant, Metro West Regional Transit Authority established a veteran shuttle in the region to bring our veterans to hospital sites in Boston, provide them with a way of getting in there. We have a great VA system in the Boston area, so to provide trips to those guys. And so this Mobility Management Center will really help coordinate those trips along with our other trips in the region. And as Bruno had mentioned, we are working to create a partnership between what Bruno is doing in the Massachusetts area with the Human Service Transportation and our Regional Transit Authority in Metro West. I guess briefly I can speak of some experience that I've had with translating mobility management software inter-vendor when we're establishing software for the first time. So we're moving from one software piece to another. We're moving from one database. When Metro West is a relatively new regional transit authority. So we started 7 or 8 years ago, and at the time, Boston, the MBTA, was servicing our region. So we needed to bring over that client data and create our own software database. So trying to translate that data, even with the same vendor, became an issue where, because of versioning issues and other problems along the way, trying to get that data from one database to another. Same vendor, they have access to everything. Worked, but not without problem. I've also had experience where I'm trying to move from one software to another software. So this is kind of all offline, not production. We have all the time in the world to move from one piece of software to the next. And the result of that has been members of a call center having to retype in every piece of data again and again. And obviously every time that you do that, you create problems where there's data entry issues that can result. So it's just surprising to me that we can start with a database and a vendor would rather you type everything in again, and so it really brings the need, it really just highlights this need for a standard where, well, why can't I export this data from one program to another? Google has come in and done a great job through the GTFS feeds to present this standard for fixed route services, where, and it now seems like all the vendors are really buying into this GTFS feed piece, where I can take data from one program, export it to GTFS, and now we're able to import that data from GTFS. So we just recently actually did a fixed route changeover in our software, and it was a much simpler process because we had a GTFS feed to begin with. Because it's a standard, everybody knows what is expected. The software vendor was able to import that GTFS feed, and before we even started doing anything, we had all our routes laid out on the program. You know, it saved us hundreds of hours worth of data entry by having that standardization. So, you know, I think it really requires vendors to kind of buy into this interoperability piece. There's been connectors, you know, it's been done, but it's been done out of need, where we have vendors already in mobility translating data for, say, a software piece where I'm inputting client data to an MDT, where that data is being relayed to a driver. We've seen translations there. There's been different vendors working, you know, in Framingham, we have one vendor for our software suite, and we have another vendor for our mobile data terminals. And those things work together. They're able to talk to one another. So it's not completely new ground that we're breaking. It's just that's been done out of necessity because the vendor that we were dealing with, you know, we selected a different vendor for a mobile data terminal. So it was like, you got to make this work, or you don't get the software piece. So. It really helps reduce errors, and you know, it's been done before. So we just, if we can see the software piece talk to one another, and so what Bruno and I are trying to do is to do that in real time, or at least a batch process, where if we in the future do partner, Metro West has a different software package than Mark does. And so we would need to communicate on a daily basis at least, or optimally, you know, more frequently than that. And so the only way that we can do that is through some type of standard protocol.
So for the first half of my adult life, I was in the military, and I had standard operating procedures, and everything, you know, worked in a standardized way, and that was great. Then I went over for the second half of my adult career, worked in transit technology, and I've been a general manager of fixed route. I've been a general manager of paratransit. I've overseen ADA call centers. I've overseen Medicaid call centers, and I've also provided technical support to the U.S. and Canada. And I can say that in transit, as Kevin said earlier, there is no standardization, not even within one company. Each location is totally different than the next. They all have similarities, but they all have more differences than they do similarities. So I definitely understand what you guys are saying. I was, for the company that was mentioned previously, who I no longer work for, I was the clearinghouse for reporting purposes. Everybody would send their database or clipboard or output from their homebrewed software, you know, to me, and I would massage it and make it work for reporting purposes to the different entities, such as, you know, their county or state or the company, etc. So I definitely feel your pain. But with I would say that with the approach that we're going to be taking with the VTCLI program is that I kind of have seen it all. I know what irks me, and it sounds like it irks all of you as well. And we're going to look at what are the commonalities, what are the differences, what do you have? Because what works in Massachusetts might not work in Guam, you know, and that's really, you know, what we're looking at here is we're looking at a global situation with this program. And what are the commonalities, what are the differences, is it going to work? You know, we're not saying that everybody has to be the same, but there should be some sort of, like you said, you know, transit feed type commonality where we can get the data out, we can share the data, obviously being careful of HIPAA and VA requirements for that sharing of data. but you know, take it and see, like Larry said earlier, we're kind of going to be like the doctor and say, is your system sick? Do we need to help you out? Or are you running great and are you going to be a mentor to somebody else? And we're going to look at each one of the different locations that are involved in this VTCLI program and what their technologies are. Maybe they don't even have technology, maybe they do. Maybe each one has a different level of technology, and how can we make it work for this program? That's basically what I got.
I've had the privilege of watching. I've been involved in public transportation all my life, and I really feel strongly about trying to make it better. And part of that is looking at innovative practices, best practices, and trying to disseminate information. So I worked for ITS America as a consultant, and US DOT asked me to be involved in trying to synthesize all the stuff that happened with MSA, all the different reports and projects and activities, and come up with a guidebook that would boil it down to some key points that need to be conveyed. And I think this is quite pertinent to the VTCLI as well, because it just emphasized something I've seen many times, is that there are very extensive visions of what one can do with technology that are put forward, but there's a huge gap between those visions and the reality of what actually can be done or is done in practice, and the capability of the agencies to put those technologies into place. And part of this, I think, is part of the problem here, that there are a lack of standards, proprietary systems, lack of mechanisms for sharing information, for disseminating information, for even talking between different parties involved. And this is a problem was a problem for the Travel Management Coordination Center that came out of the MSAA. It will be a problem for the VTCLI program as well. And this issue, one of the things is this vision of having technology facilitate, enable the coordination between different organizations with different mandates and different purposes and different clienteles and different vehicles and different practices, and use the technology to carry a person with special needs or any general public eventually to place a request for a trip, determine whether they're eligible for the trip, put that trip into a system by which it can be looked at and compared and see if there's a place to book it, make the reservation, confirm the reservation, then do the field operations, collect the data, manage the fares, and then finally finish the whole cycle through booking, and sort of through the billing and reporting processes. Well, theoretically, all this is feasible. One of the big issues is that to date, the only way coordination has been happening is if there's a single platform, and even, as you mentioned, even when you have a single vendor, and it's not necessarily a single platform, but it's a single vendor, even there you have trial problems. But if you can imagine, if you have many vendors, multiple agencies with different platforms, with different skill sets and different capabilities. So either it's been through group purchases, single platforms, or a single agency that's taken the ball and been able to have the resources to run with it. So there's some significant challenges, but I think we don't have good mechanisms for getting this discussion on the table, but I'm thankful that Larry's getting this going, and all of you are in your own ways, and just bringing people together to exchange information is a great starting point for all this. Thank you.
So let me just give you like 1 or 2 minute overview of this project. It's about data standards for mobility management. And there's a number of questions that we're trying to address. First, is it even possible to develop data standards for systems that will enable or facilitate mobility management? In other words, what is the art of the possible in this particular area? First, are the standards feasible technically? Are the software providers in this space open to some level of data standardization? If they are open, are they capable of having their products work with standardized data? And when we talk about mobility management software, we're talking about software that can encompass multiple types of functionality. One type is what I call discovery, trip planning systems, information and referral systems, finding out what services there are. That's really important, particularly for the fixed route side of the world. And the other is what I call transactional systems, the sort of stuff that Kevin was talking about in his presentation, making it possible for System A, which has trips that need to be taken, and System B, which has capacity that potentially could accommodate those trips to actually interoperate. So we're interested in both of those areas. A third issue or fourth issue is what would the core data elements be in a standardized data approach? And finally, very importantly, what process is needed to implement data standards? So that's sort of the field of play that we're looking at in this particular project. Now, we've actually been at it for a couple months now, so I do have some things that I can report even today, and I'll spend 3 or 4 minutes just talking that through. So first, I think it's really important at the outset to get some clarity about what data standardization is and it isn't, because there's different perspectives on this. And I think it's really important to make a distinction between data and business applications. The context of data standardization is business applications, but business applications are not what we seek to standardize. To give an example, there is a standardized form of data in the airline travel industry called the Passenger Name Record, PNR. If you are flying on 2 airlines coming to and from Phoenix, the PNR makes that possible. And it's a very simple data standard. There's been lots of bilateral elaborations on that standard, and there's been extensions on that standard. But that core thing, which is basically your name, origin city, destination city, fare class, schedule information, really a small set of data is the essence of a PNR. Without that, you wouldn't be able to travel on 2 airlines. The business application context are these massive computer reservation systems at the airlines, which do many, many, many things, or the global distribution systems of the Sabres and Amadeuses of the world, which do even more stuff. But the data standardization piece is one element of that, but without that piece, the core thing of interoperability among airlines would not occur. So I think it's really important to get that clear, because sometimes in conversations with folks, they, not confuse is the wrong word, but push together the business application and the data side of things. Secondly, we have found that there's 2 different situations when it comes to data standards. On the discovery side, as was mentioned, I believe, by someone earlier here, GTFS is really a standard that has been adopted by the industry. So there's a standard way of characterizing fixed road transit systems. And people build, particularly in the East Coast, web, iPhone apps on top of that, which do all sorts of different things, because there's a standard way that data works. Well, we don't have that in the demand responsive space. So just to extend system description into GTFS would actually be an important step for information and referral systems. And we don't even have that today. On the demand responsive side, there's really nothing in place, and the focus needs to be on transactions, trip transactions, because on the demand responsive side, it's really all about inventory management. You've got a system that has, capacity. You have people that, need to use, other agencies that need to use that capacity, and And so the essence of that is how can transactions occur so that the inventory, just like in an airline or hotel situation, you fill your inventory with the people that need to use that inventory. We don't have that system today in the demand responsive space, and that's what the data standardization needs to support. The other thing that we'd like to emphasize is that we see at this point in time that less is more. I think it's also been mentioned that we don't need something that would allow an entire database of provider A to be imported into the database of provider B through some universal translator. That would be really great if you're migrating from system A to system B. It's really not important from a data standardization perspective. In real life, system, and I'm primarily in the private, my clients are primarily private sector organizations. If they migrate from software package A to B, they have to experience the pain of migrating their data from package A to B. And that's just a business decision they made to change from A to B. That's not a data standardization situation. We shouldn't even be thinking about that from a data standardization situation. What we really care about is that all systems can describe a trip in a universal way. All systems can describe a passenger in the same way. All systems can describe an agency in the same way, in the fewest data elements possible, the minimum necessary to promote functionality. And finally, to come back to the last point about what the study is, the institutional arrangements for standard setting are really going to be key for this to happen. I've talked to all the major software providers in this space. I would say that there's conceptual agreement amongst all of them that this is something that's desirable. That's great. That and $1.50 will get you a cup of coffee across the street at Starbucks. The question is, what can we do at this point in time to build upon this, sort of loosey-goosey conceptual agreement to take some concrete steps to put a process in place with the players that need to be part of that process to move this forward.